Morning. My name is Katie Yankosik, and thank you for joining me here on The Grace to Recover. We're working our way through Recover in Color, which is my workbook for the year. 52 lessons of recovery, one lesson per week. We're grabbing on today to lesson number 4, which is called Avoid Avoidance. Each week, we're ruminating and chewing on one little tag phrase. And this week, avoid avoidance is what we are chewing on. You will remember it's talk therapy, art therapy, and music therapy. So you will draw this, you will color in this picture, avoid avoidance. And we're going to work through this lesson right now together. Thanks for being here with me. The the lesson has to do the phrase avoid avoidance is to focus on how you are avoiding things in your life and get to the root of why you may be avoiding them. So the lesson starts out saying that we're familiar with that idiom, once bitten, twice shy. So it really shows, why are we avoiding something? It's a protective instinct that we have. We've been hurt before, whether it's in a relationship or with a job experience or trying something new, going out to a dance and feeling like everybody's watching you. And if you have if you internalize a negative experience, your brain will develop a protective stance and you'll hide and become avoidant. We all have, at some level and to some extent, done that and maybe are still doing it. We fear a repeat, and so we back away from opportunities. We shy away from things that remind us of a past hurt. And I reference in the book the trauma brain, because the trauma brain will sound an alarm, and that alarm is what triggers that fight or flight response. We're talking specifically this week about the flight response or the freeze response. In other words, where we don't put ourselves out there. The lesson says, convinced of a pending repeat of rejection, we become increasingly sensitive. It's as if our trauma brain then puts out antenna to sense, and we become super sensitive. Did somebody look at me funny? Were they talking about me? Did they not really smile? Were they faking a laugh? Did they duck out so they didn't have to run into me? And our brains start to play tricks on us. We have a intense fear of criticism, humiliation, or abandonment. It makes us read others as unsafe. And then people become emotionally threatening to us. We start to pull back so that we're disconnected, and it's a good thing that we don't want to be hurt again, but it's often misplaced. So if you touch a hot stove and remember that the stove is hot so you don't touch it again, that's a healthy protection that your brain, your memory does. But if your emotional memory is causing you to not go near people because you find them unsafe, that is an overreaction. That's too much protection, and you become avoidant, you become distant, you become disconnected. Relationships can feel so risky. And once we activate an avoidance cycle, we imagine inferiority and start to assume that we are actually unwanted. We can feel alone or unworthy or misunderstood. And there's almost a snowball effect here. We start to distrust others, and that causes isolation of ourselves. We shrink back and withdraw. And avoidant behavior can also be seen in our inability or ability to make decisions. We start to procrastinate because there's this slow cancer of distrust within us. We're convinced that failure is likely, that we lack the skills to choose correctly, and that we are unfit, in a sense, to manage our own lives. And the indecisiveness further digs the ditch of insecurity, and then we emotionally loop in uncertainty and non-commitment. You can see how this thing is building. Avoidance is like a slow-growing cancer for our souls. It is generally not noticed. until it has stopped the flow of normalcy in our lives. Some of you are really stuck in avoidance, and my heart is for you to break the cycle this week, to really sit with it and face it. The idea of face the dragon, slay the dragon. Ironically, by attempting to avoid rejection from others, we reject our very selves. We were designed to be relational beings. We are also designed to be decisive beings with God's blessing, God's glory, and God's honor to have dominion over the work of his hands. He wants us to do stuff. This week, our mantra is avoid avoidance. And when you feel the urge to withdraw, to pull back, or guard yourself from a perceived rejection, I want you to pause and reassess. Explore your avoidant behavior. Inventory your thoughts and your feelings. What is going on? Are you cold and distant with loved ones? Are you pulling back when you should be leaning in? Do you have negative thoughts of believing that you are unworthy to be included in the group? The Bible in Isaiah chapter 53 verse 3 tells us this about Jesus. He, meaning Jesus, was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. It's like, well, that's a verse to sit with. I'll read it again. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. That's the end of the quote, and then the rest is what I'm writing. And yet, Jesus did not live an avoidant life. He committed to meet with all kinds of people and walk out his purpose on earth. He did not construct a protective self to avoid pain. Jesus lived with integrity and purpose to fulfill the Father's will, and we are called out to live that same way, to live as a light in the dark world. How about your decision-making skills? These are questions in the workbook. Are you indecisive? Does fear of failure cause you to stall out in procrastination? Do you frequently second-guess yourself? Commit to action this week, because action and avoidance cannot coexist. Start small and start now. And approve of your own effort. So sometimes we get started, but then we end up rejecting ourselves. We do the very thing that we are afraid of other people doing to us. It's the irony of ironies. Cheer yourself on and keep going. The idea of what is the saying? I'm thinking of the army saying, which is drive on, soldier. Keep on keeping on. That's the saying. Keep on keeping on. That's the 12-step saying. There is a purpose and there is a plan for your life. I should look directly in the camera when I say that. There is a purpose and a plan for your life. This is a way of trusting God. This is a way of building yourself up on your most holy faith. Trusting God that he has something for you. So avoidance is not just so you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but it's a step of faith in God. Ultimately, this is the grace to recover. This is not a self-help program. This is leaning into God's grace and purpose for your life. There is nothing to avoid except avoidance, and there's nothing to reject except rejection. I want to pause here and thank my friend Sandy from Pennsylvania, who sent me this beautiful picture of an eagle. And I just thought that it was such a perfect in the snow there. And she wrote on the back, there's a little thing I should put on my glasses. It says, these photos, there was a couple of the eagles, were taken in Michigan at a farm very early in the morning. I was very slowly making my way across the acres to get this shot, to film this shot. There was so much ice on the trees. It was so beautiful. So as you think of avoidance, there's that eagle sitting high up there. And oftentimes we can cheer ourselves on and build ourselves up in that most holy faith when we sit reflectively. Think of that eagle. And the verse that's coming to my mind is, you will mount up on wings like eagles. You will soar, and you will run and not grow weary, and you will walk and not grow faint. Or is it run and not grow faint and walk and not grow weary? Either way, you will not be faint or weary, and you will mount up on wings like eagles. those who wait upon the Lord. Let's go back to the lesson. And at the bottom, for personalize this lesson, think, feel, do, and memorize. So think, it says, avoidance is an ineffective method of preventing potential rejection. We really need to think the ways that we're avoiding and the procrastination that we do, it's ineffective. I was going to procrastinate making this video because my lighting isn't right. My earrings are too funky. Someone's going to comment on these earrings. I feel stuffed up. So, but avoidance of doing what I set out to do and the purpose that God has for me in having this website, it is ineffective. It keeps me stuck. So I have to think correctly. It says, rather, I need assurance of God's faithfulness and the will to act assertively with a strong sense of purpose. Are you called according to his purpose? Then all things are going to work together for good. Feel. I feel empowered to engage. Can you engage? Can you do something? Do you feel that God-given power within you? Get in touch with it. Sit with it. Wait for God's prompting and then move forward. It says, I feel safe in my own skin. I feel steady. I feel led by God. Many of you who I've worked with individually, I've had you write the letter S on your, a couple letter S's on the inside of your wrist so that you can remind yourself that you feel safe. You feel steady. You feel stable, steady, safe, secure, and sober. Many of you are working on sobriety as a grounding foundation to build your emotional and spiritual health upon, and your relational health, and your financial health, and your vocational health. All of those things for you come from a foundation of sobriety. So if it's helpful this week as you're working on feeling steady and safe so you can avoid avoidance, you may want to put some S's, however many you need, or just one to remember all the S words. Do. It says act decisively, live on purpose, avoid avoidance, trust God, and trust yourself to him. If you are born again, you're in Christ, and he will not put the righteous to shame. So you can rest in that. And then the memory verse this week for avoid avoidance says, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. So a lot of times we don't realize that it's fear. Clinical psychologists talk about fear avoidance. It goes together, fear avoidance. The fear is really what's causing the behavior of avoidance. So meditate on this meditate on this verse as you color your picture this week. Let me show you my picture that I colored this week for avoid avoidance. My light is getting a little wild. So avoid avoidance. Let's take a look at the questions together. There are 4 of them. Number 1, how has fear of rejection made you sensitive and offended by others in your environment? Literally look at fear of rejection and how you've been sensitive. What has that done? Fear of rejection made you sensitive and offended. Number 2, describe a time when you distanced yourselves from others in an attempt to avoid pain, real pain or imagined pain. So sometimes I'll hear from clients where they didn't go on the trip, they didn't do the women's retreat, they skipped Bible study because they had a projection of rejection, and they didn't know what was going to happen. If that's the case, I would encourage you to meditate on that verse that I read from Isaiah about God being a man of sorrow, acquainted with sorrow. He's despised and rejected. Think of that and how he walked out his purpose. And maybe that will give you a little bit of encouragement to also set your face like flint and walk out the purpose that God has for you. Question number 3, how could living intentionally, which is the opposite of living avoidantly, how could living intentionally improve your life? Think about that. Write out what you would get if you avoided avoidance this week. And the last question, what is one way you are willing to reject rejection? What is one way? We talk a lot about on this channel Becoming willing. Are you willing? That's what God wants, is a willing heart, because a willing heart is surrendered. So you're surrendering to his will. That makes you willing and open, teachable, humble. It says God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So you don't want to be in opposition to God. You don't want to be pridefully defending yourself, posturing in avoidance and procrastination, because you will literally feel the resistance of God. But if you humble yourself, he will build you up. He will give grace to the humble. And we are here with the grace and by the grace to recover. The song is called Live with Abandon by Newsboys. It's a catchy little song, and I hope you will check it out. I love you all, and I'm so thankful for your time and commitment to recovery. Please leave me some comments and go to the website and you can send me an email. Thank you so much. God bless, and see you next time.